A very good Sunday morning to you. We welcome you in for this July 20th. You're watching Fox 5's On the Hill live this morning. I'm Tom Fitzgerald. We're going to begin on the headlines this morning. That takes us out to our area this morning. Overnight, about a dozen drivers had to be rescued from flash flooding after severe storms slammed Washington, D.C., Maryland, and Virginia on Saturday evening. Rescue workers spread out across the national capital region to help stranded drivers whose cars, in many instances, were trapped under high waters that moved through this fast storm. Now, at least 20 people were stranded in one area in Chevy Chase, Maryland, after floodwaters surrounding buildings there. A storm also brought power lines down and stunned many residents with the speed of the intense rushing waters.
I was just nervous because how fast the water caught up to my car, because I wasn't expecting it to be that fast. It wasn't raining for that long, but it was a heavy rain.
I've been here 11 years, never seen it like this, ever. It looks like the Colorado River.
Well, Sligo Creek, as you can see here, went well over its banks. At one point, a storm gauge reported that a 10-foot rise occurred in a 30-minute span near New Hampshire Avenue. That is amazing. Much of Sligo Creek Parkway this morning remains closed since the time the rain started. Following cleanup continues through this morning. Let's not forget about Texas. That is where Texas officials this morning have now reduced the number of people that were reported in the aftermath of the deadly flash flooding there on Saturday. That number dropped from 160 to 3. Now, recovery efforts continue. Texas lawmakers say they are planning improvements to the state's national disaster warning systems, which were aimed at preventing a tragedy like this one from happening again. Right now, that death toll in Texas is staggering, standing at 135 lives lost. Well, this Sunday morning marks 6 months since President Trump has been in office. The president has focused on immigration. He's focused on tariffs and cutting government spending, getting his big, beautiful bill passed a couple of days ago. It was the high point for the president and the GOP agenda. This week, Trump signed a package to block $8 billion in funding for USAID and cut $1 billion from the Corporation for Public Broadcasting. For more on the president's 6 months, we're pleased to welcome back some familiar faces here to the program this morning. Brian Kelly is editor-at-large of U.S. News and World Report, and Nicholas Wu covers Congress for Politico. Good to see you both here this Sunday morning. Whether you like what Donald Trump has been doing or whether you don't like what Donald Trump has been doing, you can't deny that Donald Trump has been doing a lot of stuff. So, Brian, I want to start with you from kind of the arc of this. Have you ever seen an administration, a president, come into office like this in the first 6 months with this volume of activity?
Well, when I covered FDR, the Roosevelt administration in the 30s.
Oh, I remember those days, yeah.
No, I did read the history, though. I mean, that's the comparative.
Yeah.
FDR's first 100 days. This actually, I think, by volume of activity, exceeds that. This probably is the most consequential presidency in the first 6 months that we've ever seen.
It has been stunning. Almost every single day we have had some kind of major news come out of this White House. But Nicholas, how much of this has to do with the fact that not only is this a second term, but this is a president who had 4 years on the sidelines, and his team was able to put together this plan. A lot of people say it was, the 2025 plan out of Heritage, but they were ready to go on day one. Was that an advantage to this Trump administration?
That's very much a large part of it. I mean, we saw, on day one, Trump come in. We saw the implementation of.
They know him in the Senate. They know he's good.
For that matter, the entire legislative package that they were able to roll out on Capitol Hill and then get passed into law in the first 6 months or so. And so, the question for the Trump administration is whether or not they'll be able to keep this up or if they'll get bogged down in some of the bigger controversies that have sprung up.
Look, we're halfway through 2025. A large part of how the president started doing these things was through executive orders. But as now Congress has gotten into its full legislative swing, that's been a change, Brian, that they have been able to shepherd laws through Congress that we just saw with this big, beautiful bill. Is that a difference between what he was doing just with the stroke of a pen and what he's been able to do getting this very thin Republican majority in both the House and Senate to actually act on this agenda.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that is a very potent combination when you have the White House and Capitol Hill, which doesn't happen that often in American history. As you say, it's thin, but it's enough. And he has proven to be extremely good at whatever it takes to get those extra votes.
So, Nicholas, along those lines, as we head now, we're halfway through 2025. Those 2026, midterms are going to be with us before we know it. How key for the Democrats is it going to be pointing out exactly what Brian just said was if you don't like what's going on with this White House right now, you're not going to be able to vote him out, but you could impact of what he's able to do with a friendly Congress.
That's very much the challenge for Democrats heading into next year's midterms. How exactly to rebut what the president has been doing, or for that matter, to run against the legislative package that he's put through, whether or not they're able to successfully paint the package of tax cuts and Medicaid cuts and so on as something negative remains to be seen.
But the thing is, Democrats seem to be all over the place right now about how to do that, Brian. You would think, with so much of their own base in an uproar over what's gone on over the last 6 months, that they'd have a more clear message from that. What's the problem?
They have a problem of policy. They have a problem of messaging. The party in power traditionally loses seats in the midterms. I would not bet that's going to happen this time. I think, certainly based on what we're seeing as of today, the Democrats don't have a coherent policy, a coherent plan. And they're running against a very coherent plan. So that's the big issue that has to, in the next 6 months or so. And it will be individual candidates. I mean, there's only 20 races in the House that really matter. Yeah. But some individual candidate in New York or California is going to, hopefully will come up, from their perspective, will come up with messaging that resonates. And that will begin to show how you're going to win this.
Well, Nicholas, you're up on the Hill all the time. There had been calls earlier in the year that Democrats needed new leadership, that Hakeem Jeffries just wasn't up to the task of taking on, the bullhorn that is Donald Trump, and that over in the Senate, maybe it was time for Chuck Schumer to hand over the reins. Are those voices still being heard, or are those two leaders successfully, tapped down a lot of those questioning of their leadership?
At least in the House, a lot of that questioning has been tamped down by this recent show of force that Jeffries and his team have made to get out there. He gave the longest speech ever in House history in opposition to the big, beautiful bill. The Senate, there are some broader questions there, especially if Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez decides to primary.
I'd even heard criticism of that, though, because a lot of Democrats were going on social media saying, all right, great, you gave the longest speech in history. It didn't change the eventual outcome. Cory Booker did it over in the Senate as well, too. The patting on the back of long speeches doesn't really seem to be slowing anything here, Brian.
It's their, theater. They've got to show something, that they're doing something. The biggest problem they have, I think, is that how far left are they going to go? There's a real schism in the party of people saying we are too far left to be a governing party, and how they reconcile that, is going to have to play out in real time.
The other big story this past week has obviously been the ongoing questions about the Jeffrey Epstein case. He's been dead for several years, but the controversy lives on. The president this week, as we've reported, launched a lawsuit against the Wall Street Journal in regards to a story about whether or not the president sent a bawdy note to Epstein on his 50th birthday. Why does MAGA world continue to go back to this, and why can't the president kind of dictate that they don't?
It's very much a question of expectation setting by Trump and his administration. After talking for years about the potential conspiracy around this and then declaring case closed, there's a bit of MAGA whiplash going on. And even in the House this week, we saw how this ground the institution to a halt when folks were really skittish about voting on something Epstein-related.
But Brian, is this a case of maybe some chickens coming home to roost here? Because if you have kind of told people, question everything, look for conspiracies, don't trust the government, well, then when the government tries to tell them something, maybe naturally now they've been trained to not believe it.
I think that's true to a point, Tom, but I also think this is a tempest in a teapot. I think it's one of these classic Washington summer scandals where, people are bored, and in this case, it's really driven by the internet. It's driven by social media. All the bloggers, the MAGA bloggers taking sides. It's too you know, we're being betrayed, we're not being betrayed. It's fascinating to watch, but I don't think it really amounts to anything.
Do you think as we move through what's going to be a very charged political season as these elections come up, though, that this could influence maybe some Republicans who, you know, want to strike out on their own?
This doesn't seem like it'll become that much of an election issue among Republicans, but institutionally, as far as the House goes, it's very much a live issue for members there. There's a number of different resolutions floating around in the House. Members don't really want to vote on those, but there are some Republicans who could force a vote.
We shall see. I don't think this story is going away anytime soon. Brian Kelly from U.S. News and World Report, Nicholas Wu here from Politico this morning. We thank both of you. We'll have you back here before too long.